What is up, everyone? Welcome to Tech Savvy Buyers. So today we're going to take a close look at the new Xbox Series X, but first let's get a word from today's sponsor.
Today's video is sponsored by GVGMall.com. GVG Mall carries a wide variety of game currencies and gift cards that you could use to take your gaming to the next level. If you're looking for a fresh copy of Windows or Microsoft Office, then you can certainly find those on GVGMall.com as well. They are priced very competitively and offer legit copies of Microsoft software. You can pick up a copy of Windows 10 Pro for under 15 bucks. Visit GVGMall.com for more information and use code TSB to save during checkout.
So welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to look at the Xbox Series X like I mentioned, and we're going to cover all the different specs, how this thing performs, and is it a worthy upgrade from an Xbox One X if you guys already have one of those. So all in all, I must say, in the time that I've had spent with this console so far, I'm absolutely impressed with what Microsoft has put together in this console. It is truly amazing. So we can run down the specs real quick for those of you guys who aren't aware what kind of power this thing is packing, but essentially this system will let you go up to 4K 120 FPS, which is just unheard of for consoles in general. Something that you're expecting in a high-end gaming PC. So it's very nice to see that at a $500 price point, which is another thing that I think was really well positioned for the Xbox Series X as compared to Sony's new anticipated console, the PlayStation 5. So aside from being able to support 4K at 120 FPS, you also get support for 8K HDR, which means if you have a new Samsung TV that supports 8K, this guy's going to work and pair well with it. Now, it's not necessarily going to game and give you resolutions of up to 8K. However, you can watch content on there as long as it's supported via the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray drive that's included on the system. Now, in terms of the processing power and the GPU power, now, as I mentioned, this thing is an absolute beast, and it is arguably the most powerful console made to date, not just for Xbox, but even comparing it to Sony. Now, the Xbox Series X has a AMD CPU that's clocked at 3.8 gigs. This is part of their Zen 2 architecture, which is actually really fantastic. Now, for the graphical power, this guy boasts 12 teraflops of power, which is absolutely nuts to see in a console. For reference, guys, you're looking at the equivalent of roughly a 2070 Super, close to 2080 performance from NVIDIA's RTX line of cards. And this is all thanks to AMD's new RDNA 2 architecture. So it's finally good to see what kind of power you can expect from that new line of architecture, or that new architecture that AMD has released. And even with the announcement recently of their graphics card, it's pretty interesting to see the dynamics of gaming. So if you were to ask me 2 years ago, will the Xbox Series X support ray tracing, 4K 120 FPS? I'm pretty sure I've tweeted in the past that no, it's more than likely not going to happen, but the advanced lead that AMD is taking, just the massive leap that these guys have done is insane. And so that's why we're seeing that kind of performance inside the Xbox Series X. So aside from just the processing being an absolute unit right there with 52 compute units, with that RDNA 2, that Zen 2, all that stuff, you also get 16 GB of included memory, which means it's going to be running pretty smooth. Plenty of memory that you'll need for running games, movies, software, all the other kind of jazz that you're going to be running on your console. Now, in addition to that, the Xbox comes with a new velocity architecture, which is essentially just a new term that they're using for their system UI responsiveness that's built into the console. So this thing is blazing fast. And I mean, coming from an Xbox One X myself, just using the interface on this, even though it is virtually identical, I was very happy with the fact that it was super snappy, because that's been one of my biggest complaints with the Xbox architecture of last generation, is just it didn't feel like it was snappy enough when you're hopping between apps or just going through the menus. It kind of gave me a feeling like there was a lag, or I have input lag. That's all gone with this. This thing is fantastic. So let's talk about something that not a lot of other YouTubers really cover, and maybe some folks just gloss over in sometimes. I want to touch on the actual packaging presentation. So during the unboxing of this, I was very impressed with the overall way that this console was packaged. It almost felt like you're opening a gift, one after another. So each time you open a compartment of the system, you get access to different things, and just taking off that little green strip to actually unveil the console itself was actually very impressive. So I'd have to say, I'd give kudos to Microsoft for doing a great job with the packaging. I think it looks fantastic. The size of the box is well positioned to actually carry the console. You're not using too much space. And the fact that they made it very simple and easy to unbox as well, because sometimes it can be challenging and you don't want to be in that situation. So this will make for a great gift and great presentation if you're going to give it to your kid, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or anyone that you care about that is interested in a new gaming console. Rest assured that the presentation and the packaging of it, as expected, it is very well. Now, some of the other specs, aside from what's just raw power-wise that we've already covered, a couple of things that this guy supports that I really like is that you can actually run Dolby Vision software, and it supports Dolby Atmos as well. So those are some things that are unique to the Xbox Series X compared to its competitors in Sony's realm of world, where they do not have support for Dolby Atmos, but they have their own 3D Tempest audio architecture that they're going to be using. So that's pretty nice to see. If you already have the TVs to support that and your sound systems to support those features, you're going to really get the most bang for buck out of your console. Now, looking at connectivity, the console has a very limited set of connections, but it has everything that you pretty much need on it. On the back of the device, you've got your typical power outlet, which is good to see that they don't have a power brick with this anymore. You've got an HDMI out port, you've got a LAN port, 2 USB ports, and a drive for an expansion slot. Now, the expansion slot is going to be used for you to essentially expand your storage. You'd be able to go buy a 1 terabyte expansion card, plug it right in, and it taps into the Velocity architecture of the Xbox Series X, making it go blazing fast. So a couple of other things that I want to point out on the system, what I really enjoyed. So one, as after the unboxing, just being able to set this up with your phone using the Xbox app was a flawless experience, and it made it super simple to do. Just a few clicks here and there, and you're back into the console with your existing data if you choose to set up from an existing console that you have. Now, the only thing that I did not like, and I kind of think that Microsoft could have done a little bit better with this, is that right out of the box, the system prompts you for an update for the system as well as the controller. Considering that this is launch day, you'd really hope that the update is already in the system and it just limits the amount of time, or it extends the amount of time it's going to take before you can actually hop into a game. So not a big deal, but it is, it takes time depending on the speed of your internet. But other than that, just nothing really major there in terms of setting up the console. One thing I really did like, aside from going through the app and setting it up, carrying over all my settings, was the ability to take my external drive that I had hooked up to my Xbox One X with all my games, literally just plug it right into the Series X, and you're good to go. It boots up all those games that are on the external as long as the profiles are the same. You don't have to re-download all your games onto the internal drive of here. You can just use it with the actual external storage that you may already have laying around. So I thought that was a fantastic experience. It was the quickest way for me to actually game on the console without having to worry about, any kind of issues or downloading and wasting time doing that kind of stuff. Now, when you're in the menus of the system, you can actually go into your display options and set 4K to 120. Now, in the demo that I'm showing, I was using this through a capture card on my PC back there, so that didn't allow me to pass through 120 hertz, but when I plugged it in directly to this LG CX55 model TV, I was able to hit 120 hertz refresh rate on it, and it felt buttery smooth. Playing Doom Eternal on that setting just felt amazing. Now, the game itself doesn't necessarily support 4K 120, but since your TV is refreshing, it just gives a very liquid smooth experience. And overall, it just feels very comparable to a PC, and this is big coming from me because I love building PCs. So I don't know if you guys have been watching my channel for a long time or not, but PC building and diving into different types of GPUs, motherboards, all that kind of stuff, and doing custom loops, I love doing that kind of stuff. And the reason I love doing it is because you get the best performance that you can absolutely get. And if you're a graphics snob, PC is the way to go. But I have to concede here and say that Microsoft has done a very well job with the power of this console and just the ability for it to take 4K resolution up to 120 FPS. That's nuts, guys. That is a huge landmark and big step for consoles to make this much of a leap in their power when you compare it to the previous generation, where they were severely limited by the Jaguar architecture of their CPU from AMD at that time. Now that you don't have that limitation anymore, I'm curious to see how far this is going to get pushed. So another cool feature on it, which you guys have heard about, is Quick Resume. Now, Quick Resume essentially just lets you hop in between games while you are accessing menus and stuff, and you can just boot up a game instantly. In my test with this, it is flawless, and that's even booting off of an external hard drive, not even using the internal hard drive. It still booted up really fast, and the loading times were noticeably faster, and I bet they'd be even more fast if I had installed the games directly onto the hard drive of the system. So if you guys are curious, coming from a 1X or a 1S, how fast this is going to be, even if you don't install games on it, it's noticeably different, guys. It's immensely faster, even without using the Velocity architecture. So if you do download games on there and use the Velocity architecture, you're going to expect a lot more power, or a lot more speed in this case. Now, let's talk about the Velocity architecture and why it's great, obviously just because of the speed that it gives you access to, and what are some of its limitations and how I feel it's a limitation. And this is kind of going to segue into what I feel could have been done a little bit better with the console. However, it's still a fantastic system. Now, with the Velocity architecture, you're limited to the 1 terabyte SSD that's inside the system, and it is an NVMe.2. However, you do get that expansion slot that I explained earlier when showing you guys the back of the system. Now, the expansion slot, albeit it's great and lets you add the storage into the Velocity architecture, the biggest problem is the cheapest one you can get today is $220 for a 1 terabyte expansion card. That is nearly half the cost of this system to expand it by 1 terabyte. And given that you have only 1 terabyte inside it as is, you really start off with about 800 gigs of memory, since the 200 GB that's out, in excess is reserved for the system's UI and other system functionality. So realistically, there's not going to be a whole lot of games that you're going to be able to shove into 800 gigs of data. So you're going to end up using a lot of external solutions, and it may just make sense to go and get a 5 or 6 or 8 terabyte external Seagate drive that's compatible through USB 3.1 and still gives you decent speeds. You won't be getting the Velocity architecture type speeds doing that. However, you got to weigh that cost. Like, should you go and spend $220 to save a few more seconds while gaming? Or, would you rather have the larger memory at a cheaper price? So that, in my books, it's kind of upsetting that they decided to take a proprietary route and not let you use a standard NVMe or an M.2 drive, similar to what Sony is doing. Like, Sony made that expandable, and I think that's really good on them. Now, another great feature about the Xbox Series X is that it has full support of backwards compatibility, meaning you can pop in an original Xbox from back in 2000, one of those games, into the system here, and it's going to run it. Same thing with the 360, and obviously same thing with the Xbox One games. That's fantastic. That means you can reduce all your clutter. If you're one of those retro collectors and you've got all your systems out, now you could just put this one and you've got everything playing on there. Chances are, if you're already upgrading from an Xbox, you probably already had only a One X, because that also did fantastic, flawless backwards compatibility. So it's really great to see Microsoft continuing that tradition of having stellar support for backwards compatibility. Now, before we disconnect, I do want to talk about the new designed controller, as well as some of the cons that I figured out with the system, and maybe that'll be helpful for you guys to keep in mind as well. So first things first, with the controller, visually it looks virtually identical to the older controllers from previous generation, with the exception of the button that's in the front that is dedicated to either capturing a screenshot, or a long press will let you capture a clip and give you those options to do, similar to what the DualShock 4 and DualSense controller have had that share button. It seems like Microsoft has finally gotten the hint to go ahead and do that, since people like to use that feature as well. On top of the controller, we now have a USB Type-C for charging, which is a wonderful addition, which means if you guys want to use a play and charge kit with this, you can actually charge using USB-C, and just reduces the clutter of cables you have. And obviously micro USB is an older technology now, so nice to see that they actually updated that. Another thing, while we're on top, is the fact that they went with a matte finish now on top of the controller. They're no longer using that glossy black finish that came on every controller, and it actually gives it a very nice, smooth, uniform touch. And transitioning to the back, there's a very noticeable feel of the new textured grip that is kind of built into the design of the controller. It feels very nice, reduces the amount of sweat that you have on your hand in long gaming sessions, and it just overall it feels nice. So those of you guys who loved the original Xbox One controller, you're going to feel right at home with this guy. It's fantastic. I love it. It's got a good amount of weight, feels great in your hands, and it overall just has everything that you would want in it. And in addition to being able to play with your Series X, you can use this with the One X, you can use it with the One S, you can use it with an Android device, you can use it with an iOS device, and you can even use this with your PC, all via Bluetooth. And the cherry on top is that it'll even remember its profile on all of those different devices that you connect. So it's not like if you paired it with your Xbox, you now can't pair with your phone until you unpair it. You can seamlessly connect across all the devices as long as you enable them and have them handshake correctly the first time around. So a very, very nifty little addition that I feel like Microsoft didn't promote as much as they should have, because this is fantastic. I know this video is going on a little bit longer, and I apologize for that, but thank you very much for sticking through to this part, because I do feel it's important to talk about the actual console's physical aspects and what I didn't really like about it. So number one, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. It's the fact that there aren't any launch titles for the console. Now, I know Xbox is going a different route with how they're deciding to do their games, and they've invested a lot in their studios, and they're making acquisitions left and right to build their game library, but it's still taking them too long. And the fact that we don't have any launch titles that can really show the true potential of the console is worrisome at best. So it doesn't mean there's not going to be a good launch number of titles, or not launch titles, but a good number of titles to come in the future. But still, it would have been nice to see some titles really show off the ability of the system now versus waiting months and months and months for new titles to come in. As far as third-party titles are concerned, you're probably going to get arguably the best experience between consoles playing on the Xbox, just based on the raw power that this thing can output and the different settings that it's got available to it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You're not really going to have a huge library of games to do in the start. The other thing I don't really like, and I'm going to be honest, this is a very subjective opinion, is just the overall design of the system. So it looks decent to some people and it doesn't look decent to some people. So for me specifically, I'm not a huge fan of the look of it. I do like the little green glow, and by the way, it's not actually a light that turns on. It's actually green paint in the inside of the grills that give it that effect that you see on camera right there. It looks nice in that aspect, but it's a giant block, and it's actually really heavy. Like, this guy is heavy. I mean, I can't recall the exact weight off the top of my head, but this guy's got a significant amount of weight to it. So with the weight aside and the ugly looks, in my opinion, again, don't crucify me for this. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people that find this thing very attractive. I just think it's very boring. It doesn't scream next gen to me. It doesn't have any cool flashy stuff, any type of nice lighting or whatever it would be that would make it look more modernized. It's just got a very flattish look. That, with the launch titles and the bulkiness of it, and just the aesthetics overall are honestly the only cons I have. So what does that tell you? Most of the stuff that I don't like about it are subjective, meaning it may be completely different for you. If you have a great space for putting this big bad boy on your console area or your TV units or whatever, then it's going to work fine for you. Now, the last thing I'd mention is the amount of heat that's being generated off the top of the console. So bear in mind, wherever you're going to put this, you need to make sure that you get it proper ventilation so that it doesn't, overheat itself. And just last, overall, guys, like form and functionality wise, I mean, I like that they did put like a little disc stand here in a way so that you've got a little bit of a gap between the surface that you're placing it on and the actual console, so it can suck up air better as well, considering that they've got vents on the back. I don't know why they really do that, but hey, it is what it is. And you've also got some side stands so that you can prop the console on horizontally, just like this, if that's what you prefer to do. So these are the two configurations on how you can prop it. Make sure you've got the space and wherever your designated area is going to be to accommodate it. But overall, guys, that concludes my review of the Series X console. This thing is absolutely amazing. It is a worthy upgrade from the Xbox One X, and considering it is at the same price point as the One X was 2 years ago, you're getting much more bang for buck here, all thanks to AMD's leap in technology and everything that Microsoft is doing to keep their costs low. I love everything about the system in terms of its snappiness, the responsiveness, the fact that you have a very, very easy setup and a transition from your older Xbox generation consoles over to the new one. The new refresh of the controller is a very, very welcoming refresh. I love all the different features about it. And overall, I would give this a solid 5-star review and a solid 10 out of 10 if I could really quantify stuff, which I typically don't do on this channel. But if you guys have been contemplating, is this worth upgrading to from an Xbox One S or a One X? The answer is absolutely yes, guys. If you've been waiting for it, there's just a massive difference, and even not having the launch titles to go with it, if you're already enjoying the current games that you have on your One X, you're going to be really, really enjoying it a lot more on the Series X. So let me know what you guys thought about this review. If you guys have any questions or concerns about the console, let me know in the comment section below. And as usual, guys, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to smash that like button and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you're up to date with new content. I will be reviewing the Series S, which is back there right now, and I'll let you guys know on my opinion of that console as well. Coming soon. And of course, later this week, we're going to be getting our PS5s, which means you'll be seeing some of that content on this channel as well. So stay tuned for more information on the newer consoles that are coming out. It's an exciting time. They say it's Tech November instead of Techtober. We have just an exciting, good part of this year, because this year has been horrible, let's face it, but finally we're getting some good things towards the end of the year. But anyways, guys, stay safe, stay smiling, and as always, I appreciate you guys sticking through to the end. Peace out.